This is the Satsanga being arranged to commemorate the 175 years of Sri Ramakrishna, 175 birth anniversary year. And this program is being held all over Hyderabad, twin cities, Hyderabad and Secunderabad. And as part of that, today also we are having a satsanga. Today, as during all the satsangas, we'll have some discussion in the sense, because it is the celebration of 175th birth anniversary of Sri Ramakrishna, we'll see one of the aspects of Sri Ramakrishna, because Sri Ramakrishna has got different aspects, multifaceted personality as we call it. And one of them is that we call Sri Ramakrishna as the Sarva Deva Devi Swarupa. Sarva Deva Devi Swarupa, Sri Ramakrishna. In fact, in the temple, in our temple when we worship Sri Ramakrishna, he is worshipped as the Sarva Deva Devi Swarupa Sri Ramakrishna. Daily worship is done in the name of Sarva Deva Devi Swarupa Sri Ramakrishna. Now, what does it mean? We have to try to understand this a little bit. There are certain, the scriptural evidences about this, references about this, and also the experience of many devotees. This particular aspect of Sri Ramakrishna. In Bhagavad Gita, Shri Krishna says very clearly, Ye yatha mam prapadyante tam stataiva bhajamyaham mama vartmanu vartante manushya artha sarvashah. Ye yatha mam prapadyante. People worship God with different ways and with different attitudes. Whatever may be their aspect or the attitude or the method of worship, tam stataiva bhajamyaham anugrunnami. I bless them accordingly, according to their bhava, according to their feeling. Tam stataiva bhajamyaham mama vartmanu vartante manushya partha sarvasha. Anyone who is following sincerely the path of God, whatever may be the path, they are following my path. That is the path of God alone. So this is very important. Important in the sense, God can be approached with any attitude. There is an important aspect we have to remember. Sri Ramakrishna has given us, told us in a simple thing. Like how, So in a house, if a father and mother have got few children, so one son calls him as daddy, another papa, and Ramakrishna says, even there is a child which cannot utter this, just says pa. And in spite of all these things, father understands very clearly that they are calling me alone. The same way when we call God, when there is devotion, when there is vyakulata, he responds. God responds accordingly. So that is what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Whichever way people worship me, I respond accordingly. I respond accordingly. And in Sri Ramakrishna's life we find this Sarva Deva Devi Swarupa. When Sri Ramakrishna was born, when he was in mother's womb, then we find his father going there to Gaya. And there he had the vision of Narayana. Narayana telling him that I will come as your son. This is what is very well recorded, and that's what we find. So God himself wants to come and be born in this poor Brahmin's house. And what was the condition of Kshudiram, father of Sri Ramakrishna? Poor Brahmin. So that is the reason he says that, how can I take care of you? You are the Lord of the universe, and I am a poorest of the poor. How can I take care of you? Then Lord says, don't worry. Your Shraddha is sufficient for me. Whatever you give me, that is sufficient. So that's Shraddha. And because he had the Shraddha, tremendous devotee of God, a great devotee of God, such a pure life, man of truth. So God ultimately gave that darshan. That means it very clearly indicates that it was Narayana himself who had come in the form of Sri Ramakrishna. Again, his mother, Chandramani, in nearby their house, you all know that one particular Shiva temple is there. Yogi Shiva is called. When she went one morning for darshan of Shiva, suddenly she found a light from the Shiva temple, from Shiva, entering her Shiva. And later on, the child was born. And we find, later on when this young Gadadhar, during this Shivratri day, when he was forced to play the Shiva's role, because the person who was playing fell ill, and he came on the stage, putting on the garb of Shiva, and how he went into Samadhi, Shiva, Bhava, Nimagna. That's what we find. So, the aspect of Shiva. And in his life itself we find the different aspects of gods and goddesses. Sarva, that is why we call him Sarva Deva Devi Swarupa. This was told not just by ordinary people. There was a great Pandit. His name was Gauri Pandit, Gauri of Indesh. And this Pandit, once he had come to Dakshineshwar, invited by Mathurnath, because that was the time Bhairavi Brahmani had told that Sri Ramakrishna was an avatar of God. Then they wanted proof, because Shastra Veda, a person who is well versed in scripture, must prove that, must testify. That is why this Gauri Pandit was called. After talking to Sri Ramakrishna, interacting with him, and he told, see, I have read this Vedas and Vedanta, etc. for many years. And whatever I read in the form of words, I am finding that manifestation in you. Whatever described, Bhava has been described, experiences that have been described in the Shastras, that is there in you. Then he says, you are not a human being. You are Ishvara. Not just God, remember, Ishvara means in our Indian concept, Ishvara is from whom all the avatars come. So you are that Ishvara. From Ishvara only Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, all of them come. And from him alone we get all the avatars, Rama, Krishna and others. So he says that you are that Ishvara, you are the source of all avatars. This was told by a great scholar and also a sadhaka, Gauri Pandit. You are that Ishvara. And this is what was his experience. Not for the sake of flattering or anything, because he himself was a great sadhaka, a man of truth. And this is what we find Pandits telling Sri Ramakrishna. And later on, when Sri Ramakrishna was talking to Master Mahashaya one day, Master Mahashaya himself was a great devotee of Sri Ramakrishna. And then Sri Ramakrishna tells him, suddenly, you see, suppose there is a big meadow, open space, and endless, infinite. There is a wall which is obstructing you from seeing that meadow. In between you and that meadow, there is a wall. You are not able to see anything, though there is an infinite meadow. Suppose there is a hole in that wall. If there is a hole in that wall, you can see whatever that is there in the middle. You can see through that wall. Though there is a wall, you can see through that hole, the whole middle. What do you say? Master Mahashaya immediately says, you are that hole. He says to Ramakrishna, through him we get all the gods and goddesses. Infinite meadow is the Ishvara. Through him we get all the gods and goddesses. Through you we get all the vision of all the gods and goddesses. We can see, we can experience all the gods and goddesses. So this is what Master Mahashaya points out. And even long before Master Mahashaya came to Sri Ramakrishna, we have, there are some of the experiences. During his childhood, there was one person there in Kamarpur. Gadai was at that time, maybe about 5 or 6 year old boy, maybe 6, 7 years old boy. One day he called him to a smashana, secluded place. There he worshipped him. His name was Chinu Shakari, Srinivas. He worshipped him. Very sincere person, but then very truthful man and a devotee of God. And after worshipping him, he told that you are Narayana. He was just about 6, 7 year old boy, and we find him, this simple devotee calling him, you are Narayana. Remember, he had not, there was no so many devotees, or world had not seen that sadhana or anything of Sri Ramakrishna. Just a young boy at that time, this devotee, he could tell. So what it shows, Sri Ramakrishna says, if you have a simple devotion, sarala bhakti, you can see God. That is what that Srinivasa had. Chinu Shakari, he had that sarala shraddha. And that's why he was able to recognize Sri Ramakrishna as the Narayana. And then we find, Bhairavi Brahmani, who was the guru of Sri Ramakrishna. She was worshipping Raghuvira as her Ishta Devata. Right from her childhood, she was worshipping Raghuvira, and she herself did a lot of sadhanas. Great, sadhaka herself. And she had a lot of realization and visions of God and all. And she was ordered by the Divine Mother to guide Sri Ramakrishna in spiritual path, in Vaishnava and Tantra sadhanas. And she came the very first day when she came, after talking to Sri Ramakrishna. That also very interesting incident. If you study Sri Ramakrishna's life, you will find. And then this thing was that whatever she would prepare, she would eat, she would prepare from her own hand and offer it to Raghuvira. She had an image of Raghuvira with her. So almost evening it was, she prepared something and offered it to Raghuvira, the image which she was carrying, and she sat for meditation. That was her way of worshipping, keeping that offering. And then when she opened, she went into Samadhi. When she opened, she saw Sri Ramakrishna sitting there and taking. And not only that, it was none other than Raghuvira, her own Lord, whom she was worshipping right from her childhood. He was sitting in front of her. So she saw first Sri Ramakrishna, then it was Sri Ramachandra himself. She saw Sri Ramachandra in Sri Ramakrishna. So that is why we worship him as the Sarva Deva Devi Swarupa Sri Ramakrishna. And again we find Mathurnath, who was the owner of the Kali temple. He was looking after the whole affairs of the Kali temple, a very rich man. Son-in-law of Rani Rasmani was the founder of the Kali temple. One day he was sitting in Dakshineshwar, just overlooking Sri Ramakrishna's that room. There was their bungalow, and there on that veranda he was sitting. Sri Ramakrishna was walking in the veranda just outside his room, which was overlooking that bungalow. And when Sri Ramakrishna was walking, he was just observing him, just thinking, because he was perplexed. He did not know who he was, who this guy, because his heart was tremendously drawn. There was a great attraction in him. And he used to feel as if to meet him always, talk to him. And he used to feel tremendous devotion and attraction in his heart whenever he would see Sri Ramakrishna. And already people were talking, Bhairavi Brahmani was telling that Sri Ramakrishna is an avatar and all those things, like Gauranga is also a great avatar and all. What is this? He was not able to solve that question. And with that, he was just looking at Sri Ramakrishna. Then he saw that when Sri Ramakrishna was going to one side, just he was walking on the veranda, a small one side to another, he was Kali. Divine Mother Kali was worshipped in the temple. And from that side to this side, when he was coming, it was Shiva. Shiva and Kali, Kali and Shiva, Shiva and Kali. First he did not believe. He rubbed his eyes. He thought that he was dreaming. He thought that he was seeing hallucination. And he shook off all this head and everything. and still he was seeing that and that alone. Then he came and fell at Sri Ramakrishna's feet and he told, "This is what I saw." Then Sri Ramakrishna just smiled at him. "If you have understood, it's all right, that is the meaning." Now this is very important because it is told that in his Kundali, it was written that his Ishtadaiva would be walking with him. That was mentioned. The Purohits who saw his Kundali studied that and they told him, "Your Ishtadaiva would be walking with you." And that's what we find Divine Mother Kali in the form of Sri Ramakrishna walking with him, talking with him and receiving his service. So Sri Ramakrishna, their Kali, Shiva, that form, it also we find which was seen by Mathurnath. That's why this question comes to everybody. Who was this Sri Ramakrishna? And that feeling of God in Mathurnath was about Kali and Shiva. And that's why we find Sri Ramakrishna showing himself as Kali and Shiva to him. And we know there was another simple-hearted lady, child widow, Gopalerma. She was worshipping Gopala, Bala Gopala as a chosen deity. And worshipping, doing japa for 30 years. Remember, without doing anything else, almost all the 24 hours, just about 3-4 hours of sleep, rest of the time spent only for Gopala, either thinking of him or chanting of his name or doing service to him, something or the other. For 30 long years, she was calling on him, not with just mechanical way, with tremendous yearning of heart, with tremendous attraction, the feeling, Vyakulata, as Sri Ramakrishna points out, with that Shraddha. And then, ultimately, when she met Sri Ramakrishna, there was tremendous change in her. She was feeling tremendous attraction to visit Sri Ramakrishna often. And one day, while doing japa, she saw that Gopala coming in front of her. First she saw Sri Ramakrishna sitting beside her. And why? So early in the morning, 4 o'clock, from where he has come here? This is what she was thinking. Then immediately that changed into Bala Gopala. The child Krishna playing with her. Tremendous, you have to read that life. And then, when it was daybreak, she ran from there. She did not know what she was doing. In full of that bhava, she was running, carrying that child Krishna. And when she came there, what we find in Sri Ramakrishna's room, a lady devotee says she was cleaning Sri Ramakrishna's room. Suddenly Sri Ramakrishna was, standing rather, taking the posture of that Bala Krishna with, the butter in his hand, Bala Krishna. She was surprised why he is doing like this. In the meanwhile, this Gopalerma entered, and Gopalerma says that Krishna, who was on her shoulder, entered Sri Ramakrishna, and coming out of him. And she went on dancing in joy. Her joy knew no bound. This is what we find Sri Ramakrishna, in him Sri Krishna also. Sri Rama, Sri Krishna, Shiva, Kali, what not. And there are many other devotees. Whenever they have a feeling that they want to see God and they worship God in a particular form, Sri Ramakrishna has blessed them in that same form. In that same form. Nistarini Ghosh, another simple-hearted devotee. Right from childhood she was worshipping Sri Rama, her chosen deity. And then after Sri Ramakrishna's passing away, she served Sri Ramakrishna. She fed to Sri Ramakrishna, just like Kausalya fed to Sri Rama. Same way, preparing sweets and feeding. And Sri Ramakrishna would accept it from her hand, because he knew her tremendous devotion and that simple heart. And then after Sri Ramakrishna's passing away, she was such a great and devoted woman that when a child was born, when Sri Ramakrishna was living, that time she had a child, male child. And with that child she came. Sri Ramakrishna asked her, what you bring? Because every time she would prepare something and bring. What have you brought? She told, I have brought this child for you. And it was offered to Sri Ramakrishna. And Sri Ramakrishna told, accepted, took that child on his lap and told, and he will grow up and afterwards remember that he belonged to this place. And later on he joined the Ramakrishna order as a disciple of Swami Brahmananda, Swami Ambikananda was his name, a great monk. Just imagine. And after Sri Ramakrishna's passing away, she was regularly meditating on Sri Ramakrishna and Sri Rama, and always that question was there. She used to consider Sri Ramakrishna as her guru, but at the same time she has this thing. But Sri Ramakrishna always used to say, no, guru and Ishtar are one and the same. But that Shraddha has to come. For that experience is required. One day, when she was meditating, suddenly she saw Sri Ramakrishna in front of her. Sri Ramakrishna had left his body. Sri Ramakrishna was standing there. And immediately after that, she saw Sri Ramachandra. Again the same Sri Ramachandra, after a few seconds, he became Sri Ramakrishna again and smiled at her and vanished, showing her clearly that who was Rama, he was Sri Ramakrishna. So this is what we find, and Sri Ramakrishna himself declared to Swami Vivekananda, young Narendra, when Sri Ramakrishna was suffering from that cancer, excruciating pain. He was not able to take food even, he was not able to speak. In that condition, and seeing all this suffering and everything, physical suffering, so much pain, this young Narendra was thinking, see, people say that he is an avatara, and he also many times indicated, if he says that even in this condition, that I am an avatara, then I will accept. This is what he was thinking. Sri Ramakrishna just looked at him and smiled. Naren, are you still doubting? He who was Rama, he who was Krishna, has come in the form of Ramakrishna. And he also adds, not as we think in the Vedanta, not as told in the Vedanta. What is this Vedanta? Vedanta means, according to Vedanta, all are gods. So there is not in that sense, in the real sense, who was Rama, he who was Krishna, has come in the form of Ramakrishna. So this is what is important. What is important ultimately? We can see God. We can see God, and any God we want in Sri Ramakrishna. Sarva Deva Devi Swarupa. But that tremendous attraction Gopala Maya had for that Gopala, Bala Gopala, and that simple heartedness of that Nistarini Ghosh. Sri Ramakrishna says Saralata, simple heartedness, simplicity. That is very important to see God. The same way that Shraddha and that love, attraction. Mathurnath was feeling towards Ramakrishna, Master Mashi was feeling towards Ramakrishna. When we have that attraction, when we have that Shraddha, when we have that simplicity, that purity, surely we can see Sri Ramakrishna. So that is why he has been called as the Sarva Deva Devi Swarupa. We have to meditate on this. This is very important because we worship God. Many times we do not have the proper concept. What ultimately helps us is that with our Shraddha, with our devotion, when we meditate, all these ideas get cleared and devotion develops, heart becomes pure. We develop that Shraddha, we develop that attraction, which ultimately results in the vision of God. That is why we must have faith in that Sarva Deva Devi Swarupa Sri Ramakrishna. He was none other than the great Lord, Ishvara, as Gauri Pandit told. He has come in the form of Sri Ramakrishna to give us a spirituality, to help us ultimately find the goal of life, which is seeing God Himself. May that Sri Ramakrishna, who is the Sarva Deva Devi Swarupa, bless us all. This is our prayer. Om Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanukampadhrita Vigraham Vai Ishavataram Parameshametyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namah.